Oh,
as you
it's
saw,
okay.
like the whole thing is,
No
hey.
problem. Hey, all right. So, hey, this is Lynn. I know we're a little bit late getting started, connection issues on both of our sides. But I want to go ahead and welcome anyone who wants to come listen and introduce you to Brad. Now, do you prefer Bradley or Brad?
Both are fine.
Okay,
Bradley, yeah.
Bradley. Okay. Um, Now I just want to give a little background on how I this is actually my first time even meeting you and talking to you, but I saw a video that you posted. I remember I sent it to my husband and I said, "Wow, like this is amazing." And then I reached out to you and just asked if we could talk. And because I find your story to be pretty incredible. And as a nurse, and I did deal with a lot of patients that had a variety of different conditions, but I never worked in dermatology.
Mm,
But I did my last 7 years of nursing, I was a gastroenterology nurse. So I definitely know what traditional medicine says about the gut. And I know you're the video I watched of you mentioned the gut as a
mm.
factor. So I was very interested in talking to you. So if you would kind of maybe go back and just share your story
Yeah, for
leading
sure.
up to coming to that point where you, like we all do, get just desperate and you needed to make a change.
Yeah. So I had eczema my whole life. I was born with eczema, and I managed it with steroid creams. So it would always oscillate between okay, bearable, to unbearable. Like there was times when I was 13 and my back was just covered in eczema. Like my mum would describe it like a pizza. It was just red and inflamed and horrible. And like throughout my whole high school experience, I was seldom wearing shorts, and I always tried to cover up the eczema, and it was something I was obviously not proud of, and I tried to
Yeah.
conceal. And I was so envious of the kids in my school who just, took their shirt off and jumped in the pool, and I would frequently just watch from the sidelines because I didn't want to. Not only could I what not only was it physical appearance, like the chlorine in the pool would just aggravate my eczema. So
Uh,
a lot of the school swimming sports I just missed out on. I missed out on Year 12 camp because my eczema was flared up at the time. And I mean, people in my classroom were saying, "Oh, what's wrong with your fingers? They're just so red and inflamed." So my whole life, since I was born, I had eczema. Then, in when I was 23 years old in 2020, just at the very start of the pandemic, actually, my eczema just got really debilitating and awful.
mm,
And what I think that was, it could have been a number of things, but I mainly attribute it to topical steroid withdrawal. So up until that point, I was using steroids my whole life. And on the side of the steroid creams, it actually says you should only use this for about a year, or not use it sparingly, because there are
right.
side effects such as the skin becomes thin, and it's
And
artificial cortisol. You're depending on cortisol artificially versus creating your own. And so my skin just depended on it to the point where it stopped working, and I had to go on higher and higher and higher potencies, just like one does with recreational drugs, like getting
right.
addicted to heroin and you need a higher dose. So at that point, my body was just really drug addicted, and they got to the highest point of the steroids and it just stopped working. So this was 2020. And so I did a whole bunch of things to try and rectify my health, and nothing was working. And at the end, halfway through that, I tried cold water therapy and saunas, which I still practice today. But eventually I found the carnivore diet, which was, I looked at Michaela Peterson doing a lion
Mhm,
diet, which is a very strict version of the carnivore diet, just
mhm.
meat, salt, and water. And I noticed there was hundreds of people across the globe that were healing themselves of not just eczema, but arthritis, Crohn's disease, diabetes. There's even a Harvard study that Dr. Kiltz, a lot of people talk that Dr. Kiltz is a fraudulent doctor, but there were so much benefits in this Harvard study that he cites, and it just said 100% of diabetic patients came off injectable medication. And there's a whole list of statistics of the benefits to a carnivore diet. And it made sense ancestrally because we've thrived on this diet for 2 million years. And only in the last 100 years have we started to incorporate seed oils and all these processed sugars and canned foods into our into our supermarkets, and
Right.
you can see that the autoimmune diseases are just going up, one in five today, and it's just going up exponentially.
Yeah.
So I think a large factor to that is diet. So when I realized this, I deep dived into the carnivore diet, and I read this book by Paul Saladino called The Carnivore Code,
Hmm.
which completely eradicated all my qualms about whether eating meat causes cancer, atherosclerosis, heart disease, constipation, all of these diseases like gout. He actually goes through scientifically and cites all of these medical journals, and it's interesting because it's contradicting major firms like the World Health Organization, WHO.
Right.
So he's going against them, but at the same time there's all this independent research scientists that have credible information, and we see this a lot in the medical industry,
Right.
especially coming out of COVID.
Right.
There's this the official statements, and then there's all of these independent doctors questioning the narrative, uh,
Correct.
and Paul Saladino is one of them anyway.
Yeah. I
That's
listened to all of them during the past few years as a
yeah.
nurse. Yeah.
Yeah. So to finish the story, 100 days into the carnivore diet, I didn't know what to expect. I just really wanted to try things because I was trying a lot of different things, everything from Chinese medicine, which didn't work for me, to even at one point, because it was 2020 when my eczema got really severe. So at that time, I said, "What's changed?" At the time, it was the 5G towers had just been erected. So at the time, I was thinking, I was doing research into the 5G towers, and people could say, "Oh, that's crazy," but I was really wanting. I noticed that was the difference, and there's research that indicates that people had migraines with, like, they were EMF sensitive, and EMF sensitivity even leads to skin dryness and skin irritation. So I
Right.
was like, "Wow, that's a massive factor." And I know I was just on a podcast with. Uh, Living Rewired, who in
Mhm.
Melbourne. Anyway, he lost one of his testicles because of his phone, which he always put in his pocket.
I
So
watched that interview. That was really interesting. I,
yeah,
I totally, and I don't think it's crazy to look into the EMF thing. I was looking into it as well. I have a condition called mast cell activation syndrome, and it's actually listed as one of the potential triggers of mast cell activation.
mm,
So I was looking into it as well because of
amazing.
my, yeah, yeah. So I don't think it's crazy at all.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
when you're desperate and you're trying to heal yourself, you're going to look into anything that
yeah.
gets
That's
on your
that's right.
radar. You got to
Yeah.
rule it out or you got to rule it in.
That's right. And people were saying to me, it's like when you're desperate, you're willing to try these things that don't make scientific sense. But I've like I've got a Bachelor of Science, like that degree on the wall is as a science degree. And in Physics 101, the first thing they talk about is Faraday cages, where, like, if you wrap your phone in aluminium foil, your phone will stop working because it's an isolated you isolate it from EMF activity, and everything
Right.
within this Faraday cage stops working. So actually, for a while, I was doing everything I could, looking in every alternate medicine I could find, because Western medicine had just stopped working for me. And at that point, they were saying, you need Dupixent. Like, I've already had 23 years of steroids, which now has messed me up completely because I was in topical steroid withdrawal and I was already so inflamed. I had sepsis in my blood at one point, and I was just weeping and really just literally dying. Like, at one point, I went to the hospital and the doctor said to me, if you hadn't have come in, because I was averse to coming in, because I recognized the pattern. Every 6 months, I'd come back and they'd prescribe antibiotics, more steroids, and that's all they had to offer. So I was like, this is great. It heals me for 2 weeks, but then it bounces back twice as bad, and it's like I'm sacrificing my health in the future for how I feel in that 2 weeks. It's like I just saw a quote from Sean Baker, and it summarizes it completely. It's like drinking is like stealing tomorrow's happiness today. So that's kind of exactly what steroids and antibiotics was doing. It was stealing tomorrow's health for this 2 weeks, and it just
Right.
didn't work. So I was like, you know what? I really don't want to go to the hospital. So I tried to hold off as much as I could, but eventually it just got so bad I had to go in. And the doctor said, if you hadn't have come in, you would have died in the next week. So that was at the worst of it. But then obviously I found the carnivore diet, and then 100 days into it, after I did all the research, I did all reading Carnivore Diet, Carnivore Code by Paul Saladino. I was completely practicing every single thing I could. I mean, there's a long story there too, because I was facing intense cramps at one point, because I didn't have enough potassium to
Mhm.
calcium, so potassium to salt ratios, and I was suffering with uh, just like the fat ratios. You need to have 70% fat ratio. So there's all these protocols that you need to follow inside the carnivore diet. And so I determined, because I was still allergic to a lot of the things like cheese, butter, and cream and dairy. I eradicated dairy, eggs. So I
Mhm.
created my own version of the carnivore diet, which like Michaela Peterson created her own version, the lion diet, which I'm pretty sure she created.
Yeah,
But
she did, and I actually have to be on it myself.
oh, interesting.
I am, yeah, because I have, part of the mast cell condition that I have, I'm very sensitive. I have to keep my histamine levels really low.
Mm,
And a lot of those, so I can't have like cultured butter is high in histamine. Sweet cream butter is fine. Egg whites are high histamine. Egg yolks are okay, but I've not, and then, cultured cheeses, aged cheeses and meats, smoked. I mean, I have a whole video on it, but
mm,
there's so much, many foods that are high histamine, and then as food kind of degrades, as it kind of sits in the fridge like leftovers, it'll build up histamine. So yeah,
mm,
I've had to be on the lion diet. I've been on I was on carnivore, but then I ended up needing to restrict further. And so
mm.
this is my 7th week. I'm going to start adding
Wow.
trialing some fish. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been eating beef, lamb, and salt
Yeah.
and
Amazing.
water. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel?
Well, I feel like my rosacea has improved tremendously. I feel like my gut was a mess. I feel like my gut has definitely, settled down.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm viewing it as an elimination diet, but I know
Yeah.
that
That's how I view it too.
people like like you and, like Michaela, like she found that she can't add things back,
Mm.
but I know a lot of people can, and
Yes.
you don't have to necessarily
Well, this
stay
is
on
what I've done. I stayed
it.
on the
Mhm.
lion diet for quite a while, um, probably like a few months before I started getting all these cramps. And so I noticed that I needed something more to have electrolytes. And I noticed that Michaela Peterson actually supplements with vitamin C, vitamin D, potassium, magnesium, and there's one more, calcium. So I didn't want to supplement with synthetic drugs. I really wanted something natural. I just wanted to go all natural.
Yeah.
So I sourced my potassium from coconuts, because I felt like coconuts were keto. And in terms of pesticides, it it's inside a coconut shell. So it's,
Yeah.
I mean, like strawberries, for example, I've read that there's so much pesticides within strawberries that you can literally squeeze and create juice from the strawberries and use that as a certified pesticide for the next round. So it's just crazy the level of pesticides that are in
Wow.
fruits. But strawberries are like, I guess they're more porous. It's like it just gets absorbed right through it. But I thought that coconuts, given its hard shell, it'd probably be harder for the any pesticides to get inside. So I felt safe in that sense. So I adopted coconuts, and as well, I tried organic avocados. But avocados are more inflammatory. But those are the two things I included in my lion diet. So it was just
I
salt.
think if I
Yeah,
can recall, I think avocados are higher in histamine.
yeah. They're both high in salicylates as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's benefits and there's also risks. So you have to like outweigh the risks and the benefits to what
Right.
suits your body.
Right.
I know there's some people reaching out to me online and they're like, the carnivore diet's just not working for me. I'm not sure what to do. And I said, well, why don't you try? I actually said to him, why don't you try some fruit, like keto fruit, like an avocado? And he said, once I tried the avocado, everything just slotted into place. So,
Interesting.
I'm not necessarily carnivore or this. I'm not ideological like that. I just want to find the diet that works the best for you.
Right, right, right.
So for me, carnivore didn't work because I was allergic to butter and cheese and dairy. So for me, it was the lion diet, which really helped elimination diet. And then when I got to the point where I was having cramps, I just reintroduced coconut mainly and some avocados too. And
Mhm.
that gave me the electrolytes that I needed, calcium, magnesium, that I was lacking in meat alone. But
Yeah.
yeah, 100 days in, and I was completely healed. So
That's amazing.
I noticed differences in the first 2 weeks. Like I could start sleeping again, and it was just going down with time. And then 100 days in, I started June 22nd, 2022, and then by
Okay.
October, I posted my first reel saying this is because like I was healed at that point, and I just wanted to scream it from the rooftops because I was still subscribed to these eczema communities online where I could see children suffering every single day, like weeping and bleeding and saying that their
Right.
quality of life is horrible, and of course the ideation of suicide is increased by 40%, and 36% is more likely to consider suicide. So it's like so people who actually commit suicide is 40% and ideation is 36%. So it's like I just wanted to tell these people that there is a way.
There's hope.
There's
Right.
hope. So I created my first reel then, and it's just I've been improving ever since. Like at that point, I'm at the point where I released my first reel. I'm so much healthier today compared to then. I mean, my first interviews, I was still inflamed in some of the videos. You can still see me still inflamed, but like
Right.
considering the 100 days prior was like shocking, and then like it was healed, but it was still a bit inflamed. But today I'm like, it's been over a year, so like I'm just so healthy.
Do you ever have any breakouts of eczema, or find that you still react to some things?
Well, if I push it, then I feel inflamed,
Mhm.
but it's not serious breakouts. I
Yeah.
find the worst breakouts actually is with metal, funnily enough. Because
Oh, interesting.
when I was experimenting with Faraday cages in 2020, I mean, it worked for a while because I was sleeping and it felt like I was sleeping in the country because there was no EMF. And I told my
Mhm.
dad to try it as well, and he said, "Yeah, both of our dreams became really vivid
Wow.
because we were no longer being bombarded with EMF at night." Even Paul Saladino, like he turns off his Wi-Fi at night. So yeah, that was really helpful. But the problem was I constructed the Faraday cage. I bought it from Dr. McCullough. So he has these Faraday sheets made of silver that you put around your bed. It has to be completely enclosed, but it's porous in the sense that air can still come through. So, but the thing is, I learned then I was allergic to silver, and I've got really intense allergies to silver. So
So was it actually on your skin?
no, but I had to touch it to get through.
Oh, so just touching it to
Yeah,
get in.
just touching it. And plus there was like these
Wow.
flakes of metal that were like falling down on me. So yeah, I just broke out into extreme contact
Wow.
dermatitis. And in fact, I did
That's
an
crazy.
interview just recently with a guy. I'll be releasing it soon, but he basically was a teacher with Wim Hof, and he has eczema as well.
Mm,
And he had intense contact dermatitis just from even things like what detergent you're using or the
mhm.
bed sheets that you choose if it's not cotton. So it's all of the aspects that you have to think about as well when you're trying to heal. It's not just
Yeah,
diet, it's what you're engaged with. So
right.
actually recently, like a few months back, I was playing this guitar and it had bronze strings, and I didn't realize I had a bronze allergy. So I was touching the strings and it actually broke out into contact dermatitis everywhere where I was in contact with the guitar strings. Funnily enough, not my fingers because the skin is more firmer on the fingers and the feet. But
Right, you probably have
like,
calluses from the
yeah,
playing.
normally I get calluses from the playing, but like it was on my wrists and it was on my chest because I touched my chest and it was on my neck. So that all broke out because of guitar strings.
Wow,
So
that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
So, is it okay with you if I play, like, for people watching the video that I first saw
Yeah,
of
of course
you?
you can. Yeah,
Because I think
please.
that I think that it's really important to be able to actually see,
Mm.
because and if you're queasy, for those of you watching, if you're queasy when it comes to severe skin infections, just go like this.
Yeah.
It's only a little over a minute, and then come back. But I found that this video, like, a picture is says it all.
Mm.
So let me just go ahead and get over here, and I'm gonna go and play this just for a minute.
Mhm.
And can you see it?
For 23 years, all dermatologists could offer me were steroid creams, UV therapy, and antibiotics. When they stopped working for me, They offered me Dupixent injections, a lifetime dependency on drugs. What if I told you you could heal yourself naturally? No drugs, no medicine. This was me 100 days before healing. This is me today. You see, Western medicine doesn't address the root cause of the eczema. Steroid creams and Dupixent are just masks, band-aids. The problem lies in the gut. The chemicals and the anti-nutrients in the food you are eating are penetrating your gut lining, alarming your immune system, which is causing the eczema on your skin. In 100 days, by changing my diet, I went from dying to the most healthy I've ever been in my life. I was born with eczema. Today, I am free.
Yeah.
So that's the first video I saw, and I was just pretty blown away. Now you mentioned that me. Sorry, something else came on. Um,
Okay.
you mentioned you were born with eczema. So I
Hmm.
guess the question I have is, did you literally come out of the womb with eczema?
No, well, I guess born is not the right phrase. I mean,
Mhm.
I think when I say born, I mean within the first few weeks, I already had eczema
Okay.
developing. So it
Okay.
could have been many things. Like I can't label exactly what it is. It may have some people. I mean, there's actual studies done which attribute there's increased inflammation following, you know, uh, the inoculations that you get
Correct.
as a child. So
And they
it,
give
it
you
may have
vitamin
been that.
K. They give you
That's
vitamin
right.
K and hepatitis B
Hmm.
on day
So so
one.
so I think vitamin K, I actually had quite a severe reaction to the
Mhm.
point where I was facing jaundice as a little infant, and they put
Mhm.
me in this blue
Yeah.
UV bed, I believe, or
Yeah.
something like that, so that I could survive. And so, yeah, and hepatitis B, I just had negative reactions to the point where eczema developed quite quickly after. So I can't say for sure, but
Which
if
is,
the
like, interesting because of the reactions that you have now to metal, and I know that there's the adjuvants that are in
yeah, yeah,
those.
hmm,
That interesting, I wonder if that kinda set off a fire in your immune system,
yeah. Well, that's what I have a hunch is
your
what's going
theory.
on, but I can't say that for sure.
Right,
People
and it's
say you're a crazy conspiracy theorist for going there, and all that. And,
no, I mean, I know people say that. I know it's been a very hot topic over the past several years particularly, but I think that it's just like we're seeing so much science around nutrition
mm,
that shows that what we've been told is not accurate. I think that there's a whole body of science in that area as well. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
and it's one of the things, I mean, I think that when you're looking at these immune responses, you can't be discarding any possible theory. I mean, especially when you're dealing with eczema as a tiny little infant.
Mm.
You got to be asking, what were they exposed to?
Yeah.
You know,
And I find it curious that they say eczema is common in children and then it goes away for many
right.
as you become an adult. And then Robert F. Kennedy, like I'm reading his book right now,
I've got his
The
book too.
Real Anthony Fauci, yeah.
Mhm.
He's brilliant. I saw his podcast with Joe Rogan and he talks about it's the actual virus that they inject into you is not sufficient enough to alarm the immune system, and that's why they add all these adjuvants,
Correct.
like the metals, aluminium and thermosol, so that it can actually inflame your immune system, so it can
Right.
actually start categorizing this virus. So yeah, and it is very interesting that I've got this high sensitivity and allergy to metals today.
And you didn't grow out of it. I mean, because you
Yeah.
carried it on into adulthood. Now, I guess one question that people might have is what's the difference between eczema and psoriasis? Do you know?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this, but I mean,
Did
there's
the
all these, yeah, there's all
did the
these different
doctors
forms
have
of
a
eczema.
differential diagnosis, and did they like, was there any particular test that they did to determine you had eczema? Because I know there's so much
Yeah.
crossover.
Yeah. I'm not actually too sure. I mean, what they just looked at my skin and they just said it was eczema, and then they
Mm.
prescribed me the steroids. And yeah, I haven't actually delved too far, sorry, into
That's
the
okay. That's all
differences.
right. I was
Yeah.
just curious because I know
Mm,
it's interesting because I know that psoriasis is technically considered an autoimmune disease, and they say that
mm,
eczema isn't, but they're not it doesn't seem like there's a lot of certainty about that. It
mm,
just reacts kind of very similar. Maybe you
yeah,
don't have those auto antibodies that you would have with psoriasis, but really interesting.
yeah,
And so, because the treatment basically, it sounds like the treatment is pretty much similar.
yeah. I mean, it runs in my family. I've got, like, on my mum's side, I've got these
Mhm.
genetic traits. Like my cousin has it. My cousin, my nephew, my second cousin, my cousin's son has it, and my uncle had it. So all on my mum's
Okay,
side, there's all this history, genetic history of eczema. So,
interesting.
and yeah, it all manifests differently. So my cousin has really dry skin, whereas my eczema was more in patches, like islands of red. That,
Mm,
like, my skin was relatively normal, but you'd see these huge, like almost like vitiligo, except it was just red and weeping.
mm,
So I don't know if that's exactly the difference between psoriasis and eczema, but some are very dry. Mine was just weeping and bleeding.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so you did end up, like you said, you ended up in the hospital, and I was looking, listening to your story, and you ended up with sepsis,
Yes. Yeah.
um, which most
It
people,
was
if they know sepsis, is can be very deadly.
Yeah, poisoning in the blood.
Yeah, it's basically an
Yeah,
infection that has reached the bloodstream.
yeah. So I had to just
And
go on, like, carnivore didn't get me out of that. I had to go on strong
correct,
antibiotics and strong
right,
steroids, and after that, like, that was the point where the doctor said you could have died in the next week. So
right,
after that point, I said, you know what, that's not long after that. I said, I can't continue this cycle because it's just going to get worse. And there's only two ways from here. Either I go down the Dupixent pathway, where I take 2 injections per month, 24 per year, 480 in 20 years, which I really don't want to have a dependency to drugs, given I've already been dependent for the last 23 years on steroids. And I feel like it's just going to postpone the natural healing long term. It's just going to suppress it again. So what they don't say Dupixent is an immunosuppressant. It's Dupimilab is it suppresses this cytokine protein called interleukin.
mhm,
So it's another form of suppressing, not like
right.
the biologic methotrexate where it suppresses the whole body, but it suppresses a precise cytokine which inflames eczema.
It's
So I really,
targeted more to eczema.
yeah, so I
Yeah,
really didn't. It just, from what I was seeing, it's just another form of suppressing expression, and it's not addressing the initial root cause, which is starting in the gut because of what we're feeding ourselves. So I just, at that point, a lot of people were actually reaching out to me saying, why do you have this huge aversion to trying Dupixent? It really worked for me, and I don't really have conjunctivitis that often. That was another major factor which swayed my opinion because, I mean, I have said that, like, it may have been the vaccines as a kid, but I was open to the idea of taking a few vaccines if it healed me forever, but it's not one or two, it's two per month indefinitely forever. And I really didn't want that dependency. So yeah, they were saying you shouldn't be so averse, you should just try it. And I'm like, I just held off until, and then I just really wanted to try diet first before going there. I always had Dupixent actually as a last resort, like the
right.
last, the metaphorical, like the last gun or whatever. Like, I'm going to use this, but I went to diet, and fortunately, of course, diet healed me up, and then
Yeah.
now I don't
Did
have
you
to.
did you get any pushback from doctors or feedback from doctors?
Yeah, of course. I actually went back to my doctor, and I walked in because I had to see him. I think it was for, oh yeah, I've got a angioma on my chest, a benign
Mhm.
angioma. So I just wanted to see him about it to see what his opinion was. And he's, because I've seen him for many years about eczema, he says, well, "How about your eczema? You haven't been coming back for a while. How is your eczema?" And I took off my clothes and showed him, and he said, "Wow, it's all cured. What have you been doing?" And then I said, "Well, I actually had the carnivore code in my bag, the Paul Saladino." So I took it out and I said, I've just been following this doctor's advice. And then straight away, he just looked at me and says, you really don't want to be following these fad diets and this pseudoscience. It's not proven. And
He
I'm
just
like,
got
well,
done
it worked
looking
for
at
me.
he just that's amazing. He just got done looking at your beautifully healed skin
Yeah.
and wanted to find out, like, what miracle drug you tried, huh? And
Yeah.
it turns
Yeah.
out it was the carnivore diet, so that
But the
was a big
most,
no.
the most insidious thing was afterwards, he said, you know, you're not completely healed though. There is some dryness still here. I think you could still go on to Dupixent if you wanted to. And I was like, no, this is too much.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. My goodness. So it's you mentioned that the gut is a real key. How much
Yes.
have you dug into that and done any more research about, like,
Yeah. So
what
I've
you think
done
might be going
research,
on?
like continuing my research on it.
Yeah, like,
You,
what have you found out about the gut when it
yeah.
comes
So
to conditions like yours?
yeah. So I found, so they call it leaky gut or
Mhm.
increased intestinal permeability. So basically, your gut becomes porous when you're eating foods that are inflammatory. So normally you have billions of tight junctions that in your immune system, like your immune system, oh, sorry, not immune system, your digestive system from your mouth to your anus has billions of tight junctions that are usually sealed. But when you eat foods that are inflammatory, they split apart and they become porous.
Okay.
So this is what you call increased intestinal permeability, gastrointestinal permeability. And this is all scientific. This is not denied at all. What is questioned is whether that porous nature of the gut is then linked with eczema or autoimmune diseases, where I'm extending it further and well, at least trying to prove by the fact that I've healed myself and people who have used the carnivore diet to heal themselves as well across the world in the Harvard study that it is in fact connected.
Yeah.
So basically from there, I mean, just to stem on that, there is studies of people who have Parkinson's disease who have severed the vagus nerve, which connects the gut to the brain, the gut-brain axis. And so by severing that, by performing a vagotomy, I
Mhm.
believe it's called. So by severing that, their brain then is actually scientifically, statistically proven to lower in Parkinson's disease because the gut is no longer inflaming the brain. So what Paul Saladino talks about
Mm.
is
Interesting.
all of these problems from arthritis to gout to inflammation, eczema. He even goes so far to even suggest it could be cancer. Like cancer may be caused from sugars and processed sugars, of course. Like Sammy Chugano is the one of the rare people who adopted a keto diet and cured herself of stage 4 colorectal cancer. So by adopting a high protein diet. So
Yeah.
he's arguing, Hippocrates, the father of all medicine, also said it all starts in the gut, and the fastest way to heal is to fast and to change your diet. So yeah, when you eat these inflammatory foods, these tight junctions split, and then what happens is zululin, I believe it's called, zululin is released, which is like a response to these inflammatory foods. So the junctions split, and then these toxic particles can permeate the porous epithelial layer, and
And it
then
doesn't even need to be toxic necessarily. It's just particles that are normally larger
yeah,
that your body wouldn't, as that is not supposed to be in your bloodstream.
yeah, and it's
You
not
know,
supposed to be
it's
in the
supposed to
bloodstream,
be
which
something
exactly
that's
right,
passed through. Yeah, it
which
could be
which
something.
activates the immune system. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And so your immune system recognizes it as foreign and starts to develop antibodies. Now, have you heard of Sophia Clemens?
no, I haven't.
You'd look her up. Her name is spelled, I think it's pronounced like Sophia, but it's Zsofia, Clemens. She is from, I think she's from Bulgaria or Belgium. I'm horrible with countries, but
Mm,
um she has done she runs a research foundation, and they have been doing research for over 10 years on, it's the carnivore diet. She calls it something different, but she said it's meat and fat.
Mm.
diet. So it is carnivore. And she has so many interesting case studies on their website about all these people with different diseases that they've actually healed
Mm.
with the carnivore diet. Now I was reading one of them where it was a Crohn's patient, and she actually ran the gut permeability test on this patient before and after the
Wow.
carnivore diet, and the
Mm.
gut permeability incredibly improved in
Mm.
this, and went back to normal in this Crohn's patient just by eating meat and fat.
Yeah.
She has actually had a type 1 diabetic who not only got off of all of their insulin, their beta cells started producing insulin,
Mm.
which is unheard of in a type 1 diabetic. So
Yeah.
check her out. You might find her interesting, but she talks, the whole gut permeability thing is really a key. And it's interesting that you mentioned, that the early scientists that knew that. Where do
Mm.
what do you think happened? I mean, we seem to know things back then that we don't know
Yeah.
anymore.
I think, well, Ansel Keys came along, and he
Mm,
was he was advocating that saturated fats is incredibly bad for you. And if you read a book called The Clot Thickens by Dr. Malcolm Kendrick, he was basically alluding to the fact
mm.
that the majority of Ansel Keys' work was actually not based in evidence whatsoever. And from that, he just disseminated all of this propaganda, really, that
Is he the
the
one that
whole
kind of picked and chose the different countries that he wanted to include in his study to kind of manipulate the outcome?
I'm not sure about that, but he was basically in. He worked mainly in America. I'm not sure if that or if he did
Mhm,
that, but anyway, he disseminated all this propaganda which wasn't based in science and evidence,
mm.
which a lot of scientists were alarmingly trying to say, no, we can't disseminate this just yet because there's no proof of that. But it was too late. The association was already made, and people just stopped eating fat, and were adopting instead seed oils, which are far worse. And Dr. Paul Mason illustrates this. He has
Mhm.
this graph of deaths, like the death rate, and he has like a green line of seed oils, and he has a red line for saturated fat, and the seed oils is far higher. So he goes so far to say, like, I believe it too. Saturated fat is not bad for you. You can have as much fat as you want, and it's okay. It's the seed oils, which
Right.
and the sugar, which is causing all the inflammation, obesity. I mean, you look at these. Sean Baker shares all of these videos of people in the like 1880s and 1800s who are they're just sourcing their food from local farms. Everything's natural, and not one person's obese.
Yeah.
Whereas today, everyone is insulin resistant and suffering with autoimmune disorders.
Yeah.
And another statistic, I mean, another amazing fact is gluten. Um, so many people have been developing gluten intolerances only recently between 2000 and 2010, and it's been growing exponentially as they've been increasing the amount of pesticides that they're spraying, just bombarding all of our vegetables and fruits with pesticides. And just recently, Bill Gates is coming out with this new, I forget what it's called, but this new like wax that you put on the fruit to make it
Oh, yeah, it's
sustain
like
longer.
yeah, yeah, they call it something about a peel, like
Yeah,
yeah, I know what you're talking about. I forget what it's called.
it's just a bit, it's just freaky. And
It can help extend the shelf life of
yeah,
the
that's right.
produce for a really long time, which should kinda scare people.
Yeah,
But you eat it. You can't wash it off.
yeah, that's right. And in terms of why this is all happening, I don't know. I think if you go into this, it quickly goes into conspiracy. But I think there's a lot of
Mhm,
money to be made
mhm,
with sick people, and it's $1 billion industry. And
yeah,
I mean, if you want to, I mean, if you just look at COVID, they, I mean, I'm reading uh, the real Anthony Fauci, and
mhm,
Robert F. Kennedy talks about how it's like there was the only solution was the vaccine, and
right,
every single other thing, which was like early treatment, ivermectin, um,
Hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah, hydroxychloroquine. It was all just eradicated and demonized. And the actual first frontline doctors, like Dr. Peter McCullough, who has written hundreds and hundreds of medical journals, he was just shut down. And majority of them became enemies of the
Right.
state for questioning and offering an alternative to the vaccine. It's almost like
Right.
this is the only thing we have, and this is the only thing we want to offer. And
Right.
of course, as well, there's billions of dollars to be made in the process.
And I think that, and I don't know about you, but I mean, of course, I was in the medical field, and
Mm,
I was always, I was never really a big fan of big pharma.
mm,
But I mean, working in hospitals, I knew that we could help people in a crisis situation. I knew that we were terrible at keeping people out of the hospital, but we could definitely save their lives when they were in a crisis situation.
mm,
But I was definitely very skeptical about the motives behind not really putting much emphasis on that. And clinical trials that really were just skipped over or not published. I think that maybe the last few years for a lot of people has opened their eyes that this is something, the suppression of the science that doesn't support what you want has been going on for a very long time.
yeah.
And I think that there's still needs to be a waking up of people to realize that it's happening with our nutrition as well. It's
Hmm.
not just with pharmaceutical products. It's happening in healthcare. I mean, sorry, in nutrition as well when it
Hmm.
comes to the foods that we eat. And I think a lot of them, the parents see the advertising, especially with the kids and the garbage food that is being promoted, and they're playing on people's emotions. It's I think that one of the things when it comes to us, that we're finding healing at the carnivore diet is to be able to get the word out there. And I could tell that you're very passionate about that.
Mm.
Are you finding that you're having more opportunities to share your story?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Ever since I started showing the before and after, I mean, the great thing about eczema is it's on the surface. I
correct.
mean, for Michaela Peterson, many people question the validity of her story
Right,
because it's like you look good before and we can't tell. But for me, it's
right,
black and white. And of course, there's people out there that says, why do you believe this guy is an anecdote? He might be using Dupixent right now and you just don't know. Like, honestly, I wouldn't. I'd hate myself if I was lying this whole time. I've got nothing to
yeah,
gain. I'm earning no money from this. I'm just
yeah.
shouting this from the rooftops because it worked for me. And if you don't believe me and you have eczema, just do it and you'll see the results.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. Now, do you have people push back and, say, "Well, I'm gonna have a heart attack." Um,
Yeah, I mean, people ask questions, of course, and it's great that, I mean, it's scientific to ask questions. So if people
right,
have concerns about atherosclerosis, like you just need to read. You can do research with Paul Mason. He covers this in
he's
lectures on
great.
YouTube. He's amazing, and Paul Saladino in the Carnivore Code covers everything. So just to address that quickly, LDL is seen as the bad cholesterol, which is constantly vilified. And when I had a blood test, actually, the doctor said, your LDL levels are really sky high and, something's going on. You need to reduce these LDL levels, whether that's with statins or whatever. So
And
the
how old
fact
were
that,
you
oh, just
when he was trying to put you on
recently,
statins?
only in the last, I got the blood test at the start of this year. So, I mean, they were concerned that
Wow,
my LDL levels are really high. So Paul Mason actually says you need to make sure So LDL is a bad way of measuring your health. What you need to do is measure your triglyceride levels over your HDL levels. HDL
right.
is seen as the good cholesterol. And if that ratio is smaller than 1, mine was 0.333, you're fine. So, and he actually has this great video where he shows this guy who's really lean and fit and he's adopting a carnivore diet and he was applying for insurance. And basically, the insurance companies were denying him of insurance because they said his LDL levels were too high and it's too much of a risk. But Paul Mason was basically saying this guy is really healthy, and
Yeah, and it's probably gonna take a long time before
yeah,
the doctors can get retrained out of that mindset. Um, And I know my LDLs went up. They're not bad, but they went up. But same thing. I looked at, I mean, my VLDLs were great. Triglycerides went way down. HDL went up a little bit. So it's something that it's not a concern. I mean, so you probably have a lot of those nice big fluffy LDLs that are not going to clog your arteries.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of the little tiny dense ones that are a problem. And sugar is a big deal. You can have the fat, but you need to avoid sugar.
That's right. So this is exactly what Paul Mason talks about. He says LDL is vilified as the cause of atherosclerosis because they believe that the LDL forms atheromas on the side of your arteries, which then clogs the artery, which then causes the heart attack because of the narrowing of the arteries. But the fact is, LDL is naturally absorbed by the liver and is fine. It's only when it's glycated with sugar that it becomes damaged and it can't be reabsorbed by the liver anymore. And so then it just floats around the bloodstream, and the body has these macrophages, you call it, on the outside of the artery, which is designed to absorb that glycated, damaged LDL. And then it just starts to form these clumps, these atheromas on the side, which then causes the narrowing, which then causes the heart attack. So it's not LDL, it's glycated LDL from sugar, which is most likely from
Sure.
processed sugars. Yeah.
Interesting. So that's a process that I haven't really read about, the glycation of the fatty of the
Yeah. So
yeah, that's interesting. I did learn in nursing school, and maybe this was just the knowledge then when I was in nursing school, but they did even then teach us that the sugar creates microabrasions on your arterial wall. And just like any rough surface, like if you want to paint, you need to scuff up a surface, right? Sand it a little bit, create these little microabrasions in order for the paint to stick. They kind of use that analogy uh,
yeah,
to
for
why
blood
the
clots
cholesterol will
sticks.
stick
Yeah.
when you have these kind of microabrasions all over your arterial walls. It'll cause them to stick to that. So I don't know, maybe that process that you just described is also a part of that as well,
Yeah.
that makes them more likely to stick.
Yeah.
And
This whole topic is covered in Dr. Malcolm Kendrick's book, The Clot Thickens.
the clot
So
thicker, that's a great name.
the clot thick,
I
yeah.
have to write that
So
down.
usually what's adopted in mainstream medicine is the cholesterol hypothesis. But he says there's this alternate hypothesis, which has actually been around for hundreds of years, that's just been suppressed. And basically, both of them can't be true. Only one can be true. So
Correct.
the other one is called the thrombogenic hypothesis, which is basically that blood clots. So the blood clots form and then they just keep growing, and that's the cause of the atherosclerosis. It's not the cholesterol that's the problem. And he actually describes like these LDL particles are so tiny. To have the LDL build up on the side just organically, you'd have to like it's just like it's you have to have ridiculous amounts of LDL to actually form this atheroma. And like he
Mm.
uses this analogy of how like it's like a soccer ball in a stadium, and it's like you have to have like so much per second accumulating, and he describes it so well. And it's just an amazing book. But basically there's so much credence to this alternate theory called the thrombogenic hypothesis, that it's not the LDL is falsely vilified. It's actually glycated LDL, and it's because of sugar that causes these blood clots to form. It's the blood clots, not the cholesterol. Cholesterol has been falsely vilified. And there's so
Interesting.
much you can cover. Like not just that, there's also cancer. And Paul Saladino talks about that in his, because I mean, that's a whole nother can of worms, cancer. Because everyone's kind of afraid of eating too much meat because the World Health Organization has said 17, they've said if you eat meat every single day, you have a red meat, you have a 17% increased risk of developing cancer. And so if that's the case, I don't want to eat meat.
Did you ever dig into the studies that they performed to come up with that?
Yes, I did.
What'd you
So,
find?
so the IARC report is based on 800 studies, but from that they selected 14, And so this is what Paul Saladino covers. He breaks it right down. He says only one is statistically significant. The rest are epidemiological, which means there's a huge risk of confounding evidence. So, and the same thing happens in this one study that was statistically relevant. So this one study was an Adventist study of,
Mhm.
like, it was actually an Adventist, Seventh-day Adventist. So it was like a religious group who are actually vegetarian. So there's bias there inherently. And they found that people who ate meat in higher levels were more at risk of developing cancer. But the authors also note that the people who developed cancer the most were also those who were the most insulin resistant and had, like, they were obese. And so there's the risk of confounding there, where, because Paul Saladino talks about, if you're already obese and you're probably drinking and you're practicing unhealthy lifestyles, then you're willing to accept meat because you don't really care about your health. How about the people who are actually going to the gym, who are healthy and are caring for their health and eating meat? Like, does that compare? So
Right. Now, in
there
that
wasn't, yeah.
study of the people that were eating meat, were they also smoking and drinking alcohol?
Well, that's
I
the
mean,
problem with epidemiological studies. You can't actually have a
right,
double-blind clinical study done. They may very well have been drinking and alcohol and
right.
smoking.
So they're not really isolating the variable that they're testing for.
That's right.
Yeah, because you
Yeah.
have to, I mean, I'm sure you've studied the scientific method. You're obviously
Yeah, I
well
did.
versed in science. You know,
Yeah,
you need to have all things the same other than the one variable in order for it
that's
to
right.
really be a valid study.
Hmm.
And I know that, are you familiar with the Kaiser Permanente Medical Group? That's a US based group. I know
No, I
you're in
haven't.
Australia. Anyways, they're a pretty large medical group in the United States. They've been around for quite a long time. And they are they're basically a membership based medical care. So people pay like a monthly fee, and then they get all their medical care. And so their incentive, so like if you go into the hospital, they don't bill your insurance because they're self-insured within the Kaiser. They own all the medical facilities, but they also are their own insurance company. And so it's to their advantage to keep people out of the hospital. They, unlike other hospitals, they make money when you're in the
Wow,
hospital,
that's amazing. That's
right?
how all hospitals should be.
It is.
Yeah.
And so they collect data. In fact, my husband used to work for them, and they said they invest so much into their IT infrastructure and their IT specialists, and they collect so much data. So they have some interesting studies that they've done on their patient population. One of them is kind of a popular study about the that they determined that the Seventh Day Adventists were healthier on their vegetarian diet of all their members. But it was the same sort of thing where, the other people, they were, smokers and drinkers, and who knows what sort of substance abuse was going on, and, you know, garbage food and sugar. So it really wasn't a good comparison.
Mm.
But yeah,
That's right.
Kaiser is interesting. They have, yeah, I agree that it would be really good if medical systems were designed like that. That is the one thing they have going for them, is they have an incentive to keep people out of the hospital. So they do focus a little bit more on preventative care.
Yeah.
But
There's a really good quote. I can't remember it exactly. I'm paraphrasing it really badly, but a doctor was basically saying, if it's epidemiological, it's really just garbage, and we have to throw it away because there's just so much risk of confounding. For example, if you're eating meat, you're probably, like, they very well may be drinking and smoking and just watching TV and not working out. So
yeah,
it's just too much risk of confounding to actually have it as a logical source of evidence.
yeah. And that's where I think science needs to, and there's no, science needs to start having a third group in their studies of when it comes to nutrition of carnivores. Just have a group of carnivores that
Mm,
they just eat carnivore, and let's just see what happens when you compare the carnivores.
mm,
I know that when it came to the studies like around whole grains versus more processed grains, they determined that eating whole grains is better for you, but they didn't compare it to any group. There was no control group who was eating no grains.
mm.
So they could say eating whole grains is healthier for you, but that's just compared to eating all the refined, processed down flour. So it's a problem, and I kind of wonder too how long it's going to take before in science they see having a control group of carnivores as a viable option, because I think that there's so many people, doctors and scientists who think it's so unhealthy that it wouldn't be ethical
Yeah, that's
to
right.
have a group of just carnivores.
They say the same thing with vaccines. If I'm not
Mhm.
wrong, I think they've never done proper clinical studies with
No,
vaccines because they said it was unethical to
correct.
have children or adults not exposed to the vaccine because then they risk their life.
Right, right. So that's definitely a very common reason for not doing a really appropriate clinical study. But interesting. So I want to kind of go back a little bit to, like, how did having eczema growing up affect your social life?
Yeah, a memory stirs of when I was a kid, and I hung out with these friends. That was just they didn't see me any different, which was beautiful. And I
That's
remember
good.
playing with them, and then these older kids who never saw me before was saying, like they'd stop me and they'd put their hand on my shoulder and they looked at my face like, "What's wrong with your face? It's just covered in eczema." And like when I was playing with my friends, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's right. I'm like disfigured in my face because of
Mm,
eczema." So like, fortunately, my friend group like they didn't bring it up very often.
that's
So
good.
yeah, it was great because I remember actually being in the car with my friend, and like when the eczema was settling down, like the father was like, "Oh, your eczema's kind of going away. That's great. You're improving." And I remember my friend saying, "Oh, my skin's good," and he's like, "Yeah, but you're always healthy."
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah. So
And
yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah,
I fit in
interesting.
quite well throughout high school. I mean, I remember there's also times when I was sitting next to my friends at like, well, not really my friend, but like this guy who was allocated a seat next to me. And, at times it was really difficult because my skin would always be weeping. And
Mm,
what I'd have to do is, like, at the end of the day, I'd take off my clothes and my clothes would be stuck to my skin. So I would have to reopen the wound. It was full of blood all
right.
the time, and it was just horrible and so uncomfortable and so itchy and traumatic and awful. So I'd wear these bandages on my skin that were like wet dressings and wet, and
Mhm.
I'd put my clothes over that. And then after a while, I mean, they'd get itchy, and I'm already itchy. So sometimes I'd be scratching in class, and I know the guy to my right would be like, "Oh, this guy's got nits." Yeah, but he's got nits. I don't want to sit next to him. And
So they
so
thought you were contagious.
yeah, well, that's people think,
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's something you just had to live with, but at the same time, it has taught me a huge amount of compassion. I
Mm,
think, I think people who have gone through some level of suffering end up a lot more compassionate
true.
than those who haven't. So yeah, I'm just I have the patience to listen to people, and I always like I'm always so grateful now, especially that I'm healed completely. Like every day is a blessing. So it's just humbled me like nothing else.
Do you feel as though you found the right mix of foods that will be your diet for the rest of your life, or are you going to be adding foods, trialing new foods?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trialing foods all the time, honestly.
Mhm.
In fact, I'd be willing. I know like vegetables are they've got all these anti-nutrients which Paul Saladino talks about. So I'm testing very slowly. But
Mhm.
like I've started to test carrots, and I'm
Mhm.
okay with carrots. Potatoes not so much because of the starch content, but there's a lot of variety. Like I'm interested in trying the sweet potatoes, the purple ones. Um, yeah, so I'm constantly investigating with my food. If the subset of food that I eat now is all I can eat for the rest of my life, I'm more than happy because I actually have quite a large variety in the food that I'm eating right now. So
So what all do you eat right now?
yeah, so I eat, I mean, just in the lion diet, you can get lamb, organ meats, which and meat, beef meat. So like I tended to stay away from chicken and pork because they were fed soy and grains typically. So that, and given they're monogastric, that means the soy and grains get stored in their fat, and there's an increased chance that you're going to be inflamed because of the food that the animal's eating. So that's why I always eat grass-fed beef, because I don't want any soy and grains. Michaela Peaston actually still eats grain-fed beef, but because the fact is the monogastric nature, sorry, the many stomachs in the cow allow it to be digested such that the toxins don't get stored in the fat. So anyway, my diet compromises of, so I wasn't eating chicken and pork, but there's still such huge variety inside beef alone. Everything from organs to ribeye and the smaller cuts like ossobuco. I don't know if it translates the same in America as it does in Australia.
I've never heard that term before.
Okay, just
say that again.
Ossobuco.
Ossobuco.
It's just like really fatty meat cuts. There's such a variety there inside the Lion diet alone, is my point.
Yeah.
But then outside of that, I've incorporated fish back in. So I've got all the selection of fish I can eat. Now I've incorporated fruit as well. So I have all the not every fruit. So I mainly have coconut, avocado, banana, apple. Sometimes like organic, I can handle. If it's not organic, it's obviously more inflammatory. So I can actually start to handle like citrus fruits now, like oranges and mandarin, nectarines. There's so many arrangement of food, and I'm not really interested, honestly, to return back to a standard diet where I'm eating cake and just, I mean, bread sometimes is alluring when I walk past a bakery. I love the smell of bread, but I'm not willing to try that because I know how damaging gluten can be.
I was just going to ask if you had tried any bread products.
No, I haven't since.
No.
Yeah. I'm just starting with like Paul Saladino's diet. He calls the optimal diet, and that's what I've stuck with.
Okay.
But I'd really be keen to try. Yeah, I'd be really keen to try raw milk next, but it's illegal in Australia.
Oh, raw milk?
Yeah.
I can't have raw milk because it's higher in histamine.
There you go. I know watermelon's higher in histamine too, and I've actually been eating that. So yeah, it's about what fits your body. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Swiss histamine list that was put out by a group in Switzerland that of my mast cell group. They say that it's very comprehensive, but a really good, reliable list. So if you're interested in checking out, looking into maybe trying lower histamines, maybe pick a low histamine food, add it back, see how you do. It might be a good, extra tool to use in trying to figure out what foods. I know chicken, I can't eat chicken, although it's strange because sometimes I can eat chicken and sometimes I can't. So I think that it has to do with how it's raised.
Yeah.
And sometimes it'll actually, like I have problems with my throat swelling, which is not, and getting tachycardia. I have a whole myriad of symptoms, but the most instant response is throat swelling. And sometimes chicken will make my throat swell and other times it won't. And I forget who it was, but somebody mentioned that there are these hybrid chickens that are sold. They're farmed and then sold, and they're chickens that would not have made it in real life. They would not have reproduced in real life. And they basically force, a new chicken, breed a chicken out of them. And I'm not sure whether they're bigger or what the deal is, but I guess there's maybe a lot of problems with that particular chicken. And if you get heirloom chickens, that you might do better. So that's probably going to be one of those things that I might test out, is to see if I do better with heirloom chickens. Cause I wasn't really paying attention before of like where my chicken was sourced.
Yeah. I need to do more research on chickens as well, but I constantly hear there's rumors of the chicken being injected with hormones to make it grow faster, so that you have more meat to eat. So, and obviously for economic profit. So I'm sure there's things in there as well. I mean, Paul Saladino says he doesn't incorporate chicken and pork for those reasons, just because of the soy and the grains alone, let alone all the hormones added. And then the salmon as well, which many people talk about how it's not naturally orange. Apparently, it's been
Hmm,
dyed that way. I have to fact check that. But
interesting.
there's all this antibiotics as well that it's fed, especially in Australia. They've got these massive uh, like closed off sections of the water where they just keep it farmed, and it's
Farm, right.
very unnatural. And they usually get sick because they're in close proximity. That's why they have to offer them antibiotics. It's the same thing in the factory farms.
Mm.
Could be wrong, but because I haven't done enough research on this, but I noticed that all the other fish, I'm really good, but with salmon,
Hmm.
it's more inflammatory than the other fish. So there could be some
Interesting.
truth into that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, I hope that you're gonna, be able to reach a lot of people. And I know that you also, one thing I haven't mentioned is that you are a musician. You mentioned playing the guitar, but I know you are a singer and a
Yeah.
songwriter
Yeah.
and a good one. Is it okay if I play something?
Yeah, of course you can.
I always want to ask, but I like to at least, share who people are.
I'm
Let
curious
me
what song it is.
Well, I'm gonna pick something that I'm gonna pick your Billy Joel. How's
Oh,
that?
okay. Yeah,
'Cause,
sure.
we all like Billy Joel, right?
Yeah.
Honesty is such a lonely word. Everyone is so untrue. Honesty is hardly ever heard. Mostly what I need from you.
Awesome. You're really good.
Thanks.
You're
Yeah, that's my
talented.
my day job actually. Um,
Okay, so you support yourself off of
of
your
music.
music.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was interesting because, as a musician, you have to look appealing for people to look at you.
Yeah.
And I had that issue for so long of teaching, and the kids would be like, "What's wrong with your fingers? They're covered in
Mm.
marks." And well, if I practice the piano, will I end up looking like that with my fingers? And
Were they
so,
afraid that if they touched the keys that you had just touched, that they were gonna
yeah,
catch something?
it was. Yeah, I know there was some kids that they just didn't want to continue lessons, and so it was
Mhm.
hard to teach, given I was so sick. But majority of the kids I already had prior to me getting really sick, so I was able to
Mm.
keep them on. But then there was also a period where I couldn't teach at all because I was just so
Yeah.
debilitated. Um, but yeah, in terms of performing, it was difficult too because like people would want to be attracted to looking at what I'm playing, and then they'd look at my hands and they'd be, oh, what's going on?
Yeah.
So yeah, and
People
then
don't
the
understand.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a performer, it's absolutely important how you look for sure. So has this kind of getting this healing in your body really just built up your confidence in your performing?
Yeah, of course.
Mhm.
Like I was I was still trying to be confident even when I was sick. I mean, like what I would do is because as I was talking about before, I'd have 6 month cycles where I'm on antibiotics and steroids for like 2 weeks, and I would heal transiently. So what I'd do is I'd film like months worth of content in those 2 weeks and then release
Mm,
it, and then release it over time to pretend that I'm still healthy in that time. So a lot of people would actually say, all of your previous content, like, you look healthy,
you
but
look fine, right.
yeah, I look fine. So, I mean, I wasn't public about my eczema. I was trying to
Mm,
advertise myself as a musician who looks healthy. And so I would pick the times where I was on heavily dosed with all of these drugs where I looked good. So
ah,
that's the story behind it.
yeah,
But yeah, I was always, even though I was completely debilitated with eczema, I really tried to remain confident, even though I was in this horrible state. I mean, I remember walking in the beach and someone was like, "Oh, your foot's disgusting. You shouldn't like. That's just disgusting." And other
mm,
people were saying, "Can't you wear gloves? I mean, we don't really have to. We shouldn't be able to have to see that all the time because it was just so disfigured."
mm,
And not once did I really sink into like a massive part of healing is mindset, and never I didn't adopt this really strong mindset because I was keen on healing. I just already had it there. I never once believed that this would imprison me my whole life. I was
wow,
like, even when I was suffering, I said, this is when I was walking in the beach, I was saying to myself, yeah, she can think it's gross now, but it won't be like this forever. I'm going to find a solution, even if 99% of the doctors don't think it's possible. I reckon there is something that will
So you
heal me.
never really, really bought into the idea that there was not a cure. It was more like just haven't found it yet.
That's right. I mean, people would say to me, your immune system is hyperactive. It's just attacking itself. You literally can't survive without drugs.
Mhm.
And so in my mind, I'm like, you know what? I think that's really bullshit. I think I just need to find something. I think what we're living in right now is this toxic soup. I knew about the Wi-Fi being potentially really inflammatory, and the fact that, I mean, even the water supply has chlorine, which is irritating to the skin, as well as fluoride. And, even the Western countries, so many countries have eradicated fluoride from the water. It's only like Australia and America and only a few countries that still have it there. And there's a whole can of worms in that alone. So I was already questioning mainstream medical science. And so I thought that the only reason why there's no cure for eczema is because there's no Western cure. But
Correct.
so I was convinced in my mind of that. It wasn't just like this false delusional hope. Like, I was really convinced that if I look for a way, I could find something. And part of me wanted to move to like Brisbane, which is the really tropical part of Australia, where the humidity is increased, but obviously it's very hard to relocate. So I bought a humidifier in my room to humidify, and I was doing everything I could to find ways to heal naturally. So, and yeah, eventually I found it.
It's amazing because I've always had the same thought for myself as well. And, studying the body, understanding the body, knowing that the body wants to heal itself. I used to try to explain to patients that, your body, like if you cut yourself, it's going to heal unless you keep
Cutting.
cutting, right?
Yes.
If you leave it alone and you eliminate anything that's going to cause further damage, you don't have to help it heal. It'll heal itself. And I always felt that concept that we can so fully grasp, or a bone that broke, that will heal itself. You just have to leave it alone. It'll heal itself. Why does that not apply to the rest of our body?
Exactly.
And that was a question I always had. And so, but I am hoping that applies to my mast cell disease. But it's interesting you talk about the EMFs. Like with my mast cell disease, even like sound vibration, when I'm kind of more flared up, can activate my mast cells and cause a reaction.
Really? So
Yeah.
like loud music.
Music.
Sound.
Yeah, so, like, we go to church on Sunday, and for a long time, I couldn't go in until after the music was over, because we have, like,
Wow.
like a band and stuff, and it's got the drums and all the, guitars and everything, and it was just the vibration of the music would kick in my symptoms, and I'd get dizzy.
Yeah.
That just goes to
Crazy.
show how powerful our body responds to things that we wouldn't even think of. And I just happen to have a super hypersensitivity to vibrations.
Yeah. How does that work exactly? How do you think the sound from the band affects you? I'm curious.
Oh my goodness. I just view it as a stressor to my body. I don't know. I haven't really dug down too deep on how it affects my mast cells, but I figure it's my body views it as a stressor. And
Interesting.
my mast cells are very dysfunctional. And I mean, it's an immune system disease.
Yeah.
They're very dysfunctional. Mast cells do something called degranulate. And when they do that, and they're part of our immune system, so they're supposed to degranulate. And they're supposed to send out all these. They have over 200 chemicals they send out in response to something foreign or a stressor, and they activate your immune system. And mine just do it way more dysfunctionally than they should. And I start to have these reactions, and sometimes it's like a more of a kind of a low grade anaphylactic reaction.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's horrible abdominal cramping, nausea, dizziness, my skin, like rosacea, really bad. I've had horrible rosacea when it's flared up. But yeah, but I pay close attention to the things that give me reactions, and it was weird to me that I can't be around that loud music without getting dizzy.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Dizziness. There's actually some people who attribute sound to healing. There's like these that people, they call it binaural beats
Mhm.
online, where they have the frequency 132 hertz. They consider a frequency that is more symmetric. There's a whole like I'm not sure if it's a conspiracy theory, if it's a real thing, but they actually have, so normal music I think is tuned to 440, 100, something like that. I can't remember the exact number. Some hertz number, which doesn't. Uh, it's going to sound completely insane, but like
No, I
Tesla,
I I know
it
what you're
doesn't
talking
add up
about.
to
There's
nine.
actually a lot behind it,
Yeah, but this
but it's
132 hertz does add up to nine, or some
mhm,
sense. And so Tesla would always say that 369, it's like the way that the universe, the patterns can just cohesively interact with itself. And so you
mhm,
see the, like if you put sand on the like speaker device, you can actually see all the sand starting to form these beautiful patterns when it's 132 hertz. And when it's pushed to, I think 140 hertz or whatever it is, I forget, that it's just too sharp, or like it's too bright. And so we're in this anxious state. But if it's actually 132 hertz, it's slowed down in a sense that all of the shapes are formed, and those same shapes are formed inside your body. I believe in like the high water molecules, and
yeah.
it's healing in a sense.
There's a documentary, and I don't it might be called Water,
Mm,
but it's fascinating because they showed on a molecular level how water responds to different sound frequencies, and they played different types of music, classical music, like metal, various different
mm,
sounds, and you can see the disorganization and kind of like angst that happens to the water molecules with certain sounds versus the beauty that develops in the water molecule, like little crystals under other sounds.
mm,
And the whole premise was that, our body is made up of mostly water. We have
mm.
water in every single part of our body, and that if this is what's happening to the water, then what's it doing in our
Inside our
body?
body, yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a whole area of science that, is, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I know we
So
could go on a deep, deep dive.
yeah, but I just found it interesting because like a lot of people actually use those binaural beats at 132 hertz to heal themselves, because it structures
Mm.
the water in your body to heal. And so maybe it's the frequency of the music you're listening to.
It might be. Yeah, it absolutely might be. And so, yeah, it's something that I probably need to look into further to see, because I've definitely identified the negative part of it. But honestly, until you brought it up now, I hadn't even thought of looking at the opposite and see,
If you can tune the music.
conversely, can I
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
through other frequencies of sound? So you've got me thinking now. So so good. Well, listen, I know I've kept you for a long time. I really appreciate I feel like I could talk to you for another half an hour at least, but
Yeah,
um
I'm happy to if you wanted to.
yeah, well, I got to get going. I got a husband
Yeah.
who's probably wanting to eat, but it's dinner time here. What what
Oh,
what
okay.
time is it where you are?
It's 1:30 for us
And
here.
it's Tuesday.
Tuesday,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's still Monday evening here. So you
Oh,
can see it's dark
it's
outside the window.
yeah, that's right.
I'm in Washington on the West Coast.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I'm in Melbourne in Australia.
Yeah, nice. I've one of these days wanted to go to Australia. So,
Yeah.
but I guess the thing I want to kind of wrap up with is I just always wanted to ask you for some final thoughts. Like what sort of message are you wanting to get out there to people who have skin conditions such as yours, eczema, psoriasis, or whatever, or gut issues, and they're desperate and they're at their
Mm.
wits' end.
I think I had to learn the hard way
Mm,
by going through the Western medical system for 23 years, adopting everything they've said, which in the end worked for a while, but won't work indefinitely. It'll just stop working after a while because all they're doing is suppressing. So a lot of people who are sick just surrender their authority to the doctor. The doctor knows everything. Let's just trust what he has to say.
Yeah.
But what if what he knows is not everything? I mean, like, it's just in diet alone. They only have 14 hours in the whole of the medical school allocated to diet. So really, they don't know much at all about diet. Even Paul Saladino says his experience of medical school, as well as Ken Berry, it's about matching your illness to what drugs we can give you.
Yeah. And the nutrition in nursing school, it also is related to therapeutic diets for critically ill patients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing is to really have autonomy over your health. The doctor's advice is not something you should just grasp and take and believe religiously without any other thought. You should take it as advice.
Correct.
And you should take autonomy over your own health.
Yeah.
And just use the doctor's advice and do your own research. The problem with modern day society is, unfortunately, we're very time poor and we're working 40 hours a week. And by the time we get home, we don't really have time to read whole books on health, and it's exhausting.
We've had a quiet audience today. We do have people watching, but hi, Errol. You're in the UK, right? I think I remember. Missed it. Catch the replay. Yeah. Good morning. It's still evening here over in the Washington State, and it is afternoon for Bradley.
That's
so
right.
Nice to have you. I'm glad you're able to at least pop in. And yeah, usually I've got a pretty chatty, audience, but they've been really quiet. So it must just
Maybe
be
it's the time of day.
I don't know. Well, 5 p.m. my time is pretty common. Yep, UK. That's right. I remember. See, my brain's not too bad. But yeah, you usually have a pretty chatty audience, but sometimes they're not quite as chatty. So, but we've had people watching, and we will definitely have people watching now. Your YouTube channel, I'm going to put a link in the description, and your Instagram, I'm going to put a link in the description for people so that they can go follow you. Do you have any upcoming interviews coming up with anybody else?
Yeah, I've got a heap of interviews this week. I just want to make my last point. So basically, the things I'm saying is like it's violently violating the mainstream opinion of what is healthy, and it's. I'm not saying it's designed that way. I'm just saying, but there's a lot of fear to take your own autonomy, your own health into your own hands. It's scary to do that.
Yeah.
But by doing that, by questioning everything, you may actually get all your health back.
Yes, agreed. And I think to just really understand that the body wants to heal. Given the right environment. Day 93 carnivore. Excellent.
Amazing.
Very, very good. Love it. Errol, while you're here, you want to share anything about what results you've had? Give him a chance here. So I guess we'll hang on for a few minutes longer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to hear about, the different people that have, we all go on this diet usually because we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And we're looking for something, and the doctors haven't provided the answers. And I've worked with doctors, and I have a lot of respect for doctors and their training. But even as a GI nurse, there wasn't really any discussion of nutrition, hardly any.
I'm curious to ask you.
Yeah.
Amazing. I was curious to ask you, as a nurse, obviously some of the things I'm saying obviously contradict of what you're taught in nursing school. Yeah. So how did you deal with two schools of thought that directly contradict each other?
Well, I was actually fortunate because not really fortunate, but I had to retire this February because of the mast cell activation syndrome. And I didn't start the carnivore diet until end of May.
Okay.
So they did not intersect each other. But I have thought about that a lot because it would have been a real ethical concern, a real problem, because as a nurse, we we can't contradict the doctor.
Yeah.
And, and I did work, I guess a good example for me personally, and of course, this is a hot topic, so I don't want to get anybody all upset, but I worked during the pandemic. And I was fortunate enough that I wasn't in hospital working in the hospital any longer. I was working outpatient in gastroenterology, and I ended up working from home because I couldn't wear a mask because the heat from my breath triggered a reaction. My throat would swell, and I would have nausea, dizziness, and almost pass out. And
Mm.
so my boss said, "Okay, you're staying home." But we got, I did not get
Mm.
and all my colleagues did. I was skeptical from the beginning. And as a nurse, as I
As
had
was
gotten,
I.
hmm?
Oh, I resonate with that. I was
Yeah.
skeptical as
I mean,
well.
I had gotten every other one because of my job that I needed to get, but I was very, very, very leery. I did my research. I was like, no, I'm not going to go down that path at all for myself. And this was even before I got diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome, which was just last year. So I didn't even know I
Mm.
had mast cell activation syndrome back in 2021, and into 2020 when all things, it was starting to get rolled out and everyone was healthcare was taking it. But we were given these scripts to for our interactions with patients. And I was very fortunate. I worked for a healthcare organization that allowed exemptions. I know a lot of people were not that fortunate, but I was. So I had an exemption. Um, but they gave us a script about, like, okay, if a patient asks you why you haven't gotten it, this is what you're going to tell them. And
Wow.
it was not my reason. And and I also had, and so I would say, okay, this is what my employer says, and I'd stop there.
Yeah.
And then most curious people would say, "Oh, well, is that not what your real reason?" I'd say, "Are you asking me to share your reason? My reason?" And then they'd say, "Yes." And I'd say, "Okay, I'll share with you my real reason." I didn't have to ask. And the same thing with just so many things around the last few years, like doctors telling the patients the whole safe and effective line. And so we would have patients with autoimmune diseases um, asking, and the questions would come to the nursing team asking, and they send like a online message: is should I get the shot? And we were told a script to write back to them, basically reassuring them, and saying yes. Not once did I use that script. Every single time I forwarded the message directly to the doctor and let the doctor answer them, because that's how I dealt with it as a nurse, who I don't want to violate my own ethics and principles, but I want to keep my job.
Mm.
And, I did have people, and of course, as time went on, we saw massive increases in disease in our
That's right.
patients. Yeah.
Even in eczema alone, there's many I know who have actual like documents written that it was because of Pfizer that
Yeah.
my eczema was exacerbated.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
and
We had,
there's many
oh yeah,
there's
new Crohn's disease, autoimmune hepatitis, rectal bleeding. I mean, just
wow.
the, and the number of patients that died. Like I'd worked there for 7 years, and I had maybe two or so patients, maybe two or three patients in the whole time leading up to 2020 that died. And in 2021, like mid 2021 to like mid 2022, well, till I went on medical leave, which was June of 2022, there were like, that I specifically dealt with, there was like 11 patients that died. And so I started going and looking to see whether or not they had gotten, and
Yeah.
I think one of them hadn't. But the 10 had, and that was just the patients that I dealt with. We had thousands of patients. So, and we had lots of autoimmune, diseases popping up, and people who had were fine, and then all of a sudden they had severe Crohn's disease like that. But
Wow.
it was interesting. And so yeah, it was definitely, and so if I apply that, how I dealt with that, I was able to find workarounds, because I thought, well, if people ask me outright, I'm gonna tell them what I think, and I'm gonna just tell them, this is me. This is not who I work for. It's just me. But
Did
I
you face
probably
any danger saying that? Like, I mean, even
I
admitting
could
that
have.
publicly.
I could
I
have.
mean, I know Sean Baker alone, just by advocating a keto diet to his patients and allocating more time to each patient. I mean, the hospital wanted more efficiency, less time with patients, more just drugs, drugs, drugs. And he
Mhm.
would actually have a longer time period with his patients and actually talk about keto diets and really helping yourself. And just for that, his whole story was that he was taken away from the hospital and he wasn't allowed to practice for 3 years for that
Yeah.
alone, let alone a vaccine.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Well, I can see that happening, because the doctors that are not independent and working for themselves, they have to go by what their group says.
Mm,
And the my employer was under the huge umbrella of one of the biggest healthcare providers in the world, which is United Healthcare. They're all over the world. And yeah, so there was everything trickled down from above as far as the protocols, what to say. And I don't like being told what to say, because
mm.
my training as a nurse, I already know what to say. I have experience as a nurse. I know, you don't have to tell me what to say to the patients. And definitely do not be feeding me scripts about what I think and why I make the decisions that I make. So it was hard. I wanted to quit nursing a lot
Yeah.
during
It
that time.
it's
Yeah, but
eerily Orwellian.
it is
And
very.
I know there's 3 doctors at least in Melbourne who were stood down because they were obviously advocating against taking it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Australia was one of the worst, when it came
that's
to,
right.
yeah,
We had the
authoritarian.
longest lockdown in the world in Melbourne,
Oh,
262 days, and actually
that's insane.
in terms of the music that you were like willing to like asking me, oh, I will play Billy Joel. I was curious actually which one you were going to play, because during the pandemic, I actually went viral with my friend long before I even talked about my eczema, because we just were very upset with the fact that we didn't have a choice
Mm,
over what we put into our
your
bodies. Like
bodies. Yeah,
basically, it was like in Melbourne, it was like you and around the whole world, either you take this or you can't work anymore. So
right.
we both lost our jobs, so we weren't allowed to work as musicians. And so the first thing we did was we went to the steps of Parliament in Melbourne and we just started singing there every night for
Oh,
weeks.
wow.
Yeah, and we wrote this
That's
song.
awesome. So you were an activist.
Yeah, I was
Love
actually.
it.
Yeah, and we wrote this song called Rise, and
I
the
listened to
song.
it. It's
Oh, you did?
gorgeous. It's
Oh,
amazing.
oh, beautiful.
Yes,
I'm
it is
happy you
so
like it.
good. I
Yeah,
love it.
so it's funny because like I was conducting a choir and I wasn't allowed into the studio. So because I wasn't jabbed. And then I was basically conducting this choir over Zoom. So I had to deal with lag time and it was just,
Wow.
there was all this segregation and people were blaming it on the unvaccinated. And it
Right.
was just, it was divide and conquer,
It was a
really.
tough time.
Yeah.
It was a tough time, and, I
And
just
there was no science as well that actually
right.
linked, like the Delta variant, for instance, at the time. I remember there was a speech I was giving saying, like, there's no reason to discriminate against people who are unvaccinated versus vaccinated because the transmissibility rates of the Delta variant is exactly the same. So why are we discriminating?
Yeah, and now we
Yeah,
know that there's no protection against spread anyways, if you get it. And no, I watch The High Wire. I don't know if you're familiar with The High Wire, but it's a weekly broadcast. It's on Rumble, and I've been watching it throughout Yeah, I found it in 2020,
Yeah.
and they have been the ones that have kept me the most educated and introduced me to all those great doctors that got censored.
Yeah.
Um,
Dr. Peter McCullough
oh yeah,
and Robert Malone. They're just,
yeah, oh yeah,
yeah.
I watch all of them. I watch all of
Yeah.
them. There's a ton of them, and and Ryan Cole, the pathologist,
Yeah.
who's bringing out all the problems with increases in cancer, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But it's just, I just hope the people that lived through this and had their eyes open, whether they got jabbed or not. I mean, I don't hold anything against anybody who did, because, we do what we think is best. And
Mm.
I think that the motivation for most, people was to try to do the right thing. And, you know, you go by what you're told in with the resources that you have. So
Mm.
I am more concerned about the medical professionals.
Yeah.
We are supposed to be doing evidence-based medicine. And so one of my things was, okay, there isn't enough time to have evidence to just, and this is a very new technology that's never been tested on people. So I
Mm.
was more concerned about people not giving medical professionals, not even having the ability to get informed consent out of
Mhm.
patients, because we
Mm.
were given no information at all. Um, and that medical professionals were okay with that.
Yeah. You know what I
Yeah.
find concerning? I just saw these posts that like Biden is talking about preparing for the next pandemic.
Yeah,
And
I
then
saw that
there's
too.
the United Nations as well as just declared this
World Health
pandemic plan.
Organization.
World Health Organization, yeah. And then there's there's just I think the FDA actually just recently I saw a post. I'm not sure. I have to like fact check if it's real or not. But the apparently the Pfizer vaccine, the original one, is no longer FDA approved.
Well, I know that in Canada, they were looking into this, what do they call it? SV40, that is something that they think is linked to cancer, that they
Mm,
found out was actually a contaminant in them, and that this thing can get into your cells and actually, so that people didn't know that. And apparently what they found out is, so first they found out that it existed within it was one of the ingredients, it was a contaminant, and at least they say it was a contaminant. And then the next step was to determine, did the FDA know about it, or was it not disclosed to them? And I think the
mm,
latest I heard was that they determined that it actually was not disclosed.
yeah.
And so that lifts them from exclusion from liability,
Mm,
because that was fraudulent. That was that. And so that's the latest news that I'm hearing, is that, okay, now they're opened up to all this liability. I know their share prices are going down. I think I hope they're in trouble, because um, that may be potentially why people have had such a rough time. A lot of people have, and I'm very thankful for those who didn't. I mean,
yeah.
it's good that for the people who didn't. Again, let's see. Let's talk
Yeah.
about
And obviously this is a heated topic as well, but
it is.
it's I think if there is another pandemic that happens, it'd be interesting to see how people react and how and if they are able to like be more vehement in their refusal this
Well, in the
next time
US,
around.
we've only had like a 2% uptake of the latest booster.
Yeah.
So I think people are realizing, I mean, of course, it's really settled down and it's kind of the sniffles at this point, but um, you know,
Mm,
but my husband got fired from his job,
yeah.
because he wouldn't take it.
Sorry.
And so, and maybe he got another job. So that was, it was okay. I mean, e- I'm grateful both of his parents had pretty serious reactions. Um, I had definitely family members who had pretty serious reactions. My biggest thing was, because of my weight, I was concerned about actually getting it. So I was on hydroxychloroquine for prevention. Had my kit that I had, my ivermectin, and I had all my different, medications, and went, follow all the protocols that were out there. I made sure I had a stash. And so we did get the Delta variant, and did fine. I did beautifully with it.
Yeah, I remember when I actually had COVID, and it only lasted 2 days, and yeah, it was just
Yeah.
natural immunity.
So Errol says no brain fog, mood, mental health, weight loss, muscle mass, so much more proactive, improved cognition, skill, etc. Visceral fat dramatically reduced, and so on.
Oh, is
Fantastic.
this the carnivore diet?
Yeah, Arlene says hi. Hi, Arlene.
Hello.
Every so often I find a new improvement. Fantastic. I watched Dr. Mobeen Saeed since May of 2020, who is part of the FLCCC. Yes, I followed their protocol. He was demonized on videos. That's true. Marianne, be careful about talking about jab. Yeah, no kidding. YouTube won't like it. I know.
Yeah, that's right. I
So
know.
I'm
I
trying to
know.
be as cryptic as I can and say I didn't get the,
Yeah. So I should have
you
followed
know what?
along. You should have warned me. I could
It's
have
okay.
said
You
like
know what?
the
It's
V
okay
and
because coming from Australia, I know how Orwellian they were. I mean,
yeah.
I was watching it,
Oh
and
yeah.
there's so much when you talk about science, and I think that there's been such a big distrust now. There's so much of a distrust in healthcare. I think
That's right.
healthcare fared very poorly through over the
Mm.
last few years. Um, and I think there is a definite carryover. I hope that people will start to question the nutrition piece as well
Mm.
and see.
Interestingly, the carnivore diet is like trending. Sean Baker released a graph saying the vegan diet view count's going
I
down
saw
and
that.
carnivore diet's going up.
So Arlene says, Dr. Mobeen, I like Dr. Mobeen, does medical lectures and then he does his own drawings that are such absolutely excellent examples in his teachings on viruses. Just ask him if he'd do a talk on carnivore with Dr. Baker. I would love that. Have you heard of Dr. Mobeen?
No, I haven't.
He is, I've watched him and I've watched Dr. John Campbell, who's from the UK, and it's been interesting, kind of fun watching Dr. John Campbell because he was all about statistics, and he from the very beginning of the pandemic he was basically sharing all the stats,
Mm.
and he was very much pro jab,
Mm.
and to watch him completely turn the opposite direction
Wow.
has been really fascinating, and he's come under some fire. He's very careful on his channel. He continues to report, but now he's reporting a lot of stuff about injury, about excess mortality worldwide. He's got all sorts of his eyes are wide open now, and I think
Mm.
Dr. Mobeen has kind of come in that direction. There's a lot of doctors that I watched because I watched from the beginning all these doctors trying to get wrap our mind around what was happening, especially around March of 2020, like being in medical field, like
Yeah.
we didn't know. I mean, I was like everybody else. It's like, is this going to be really, really deadly? Is this going to be horrible? And, so my eyes were wide open.
Mm. And I think a
And
lot of people have a lot of questions, but a lot of them is just very afraid to ask questions, but not
mhm.
just because like their reputation will be questioned, like, oh, you entertaining conspiracy. Like in Australia, people were called cookers if they criticized the vaccine.
Mhm.
And
And it could be
especially on
people who
YouTube,
got it,
the
and it could be
censorship
people
is
who
rife.
got it. People who got it. If they speak out and they say that, I suffered an injury from it, then they're they're labeled.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
shown a lot. I think it's revealed a lot about every every facet of our society.
Mm.
And I think the number one thing is that the powers that be do not have our health at their best interest.
Yeah.
That there's other interests that they're putting ahead of our health.
Yeah.
And I hope that people have their eyes wide open to that now.
Yeah. I remember when like there was a time where there was so much peer pressure and I was at like a family event and this person was just saying to me, like, you're a teacher. You're a teacher for Christ's sake. And like, what if one of these kids die because you've chosen to refuse? You
That's what
know,
people were saying.
yeah. And then I said, I've told the parents, because at the time, like I was working for myself. I've told the parents and they know and they're willing to take the risk. And I can't, like, if they're willing to take the risk, it's not my responsibility at that point. I mean, I can't protect them from everything that bad that's going to happen to the world. Like people get hit by a bus or get hit by a car, and it's like you can't protect yourself over everything. And he was just so angry,
Yeah.
and people were just emotional. And even though I told him statistics, 2021 in October there was already a study released by Israel saying natural immunity scores 13 times stronger
Right.
than jab-induced immunity.
Right.
And I'm like, this is statistical fact, and it's inarguable. Like, have you considered that? Because I said,
Yeah,
because
it's like our
I
immune
already had
system
COVID.
it's like our immune system didn't exist anymore.
Yeah,
And if you hadn't got it yet, it's like you didn't have an immune system. People forgot you have an immune system.
that's right.
And if you look at, I mean, and I don't know how it was in Australia, but here it was like across the news constantly number of cases, number of cases, number of cases, which mean nothing.
Yeah,
But people were like, the cases are increasing, the cases are increasing. And the testing, one of the things about the testing, and this was one of the things that really was a big red flag for me early on, like back in March, April-ish. I think it was March. No, it was April 2020. I had a resource that I used, an online resource for looking at just labs that I maybe not be as familiar with that we prescribe for patients or, testing. And I looked up the PCR test because it's like that was the big thing. And everybody's like, okay, we're going to do PCR testing. And the place where I work, actually, we were, I think the one place who actually was part of a clinical trial with the University of Washington to find out whether or not people could self-swab and still come out with accurate results. So if you were able to self-swab, if you had to take a test, you can thank my employer for that. But instead of having that thing jammed up to your brain.
yeah,
But I looked on this site and just to familiarize myself with this PCR test and read about it, and it said it was, it was a screening test, and it could detect a bunch of different things, or could detect residual debris from old pathogens. Um, but it said it's not to be used for diagnostic purposes. And then I went back to the same site a couple weeks later. It was like the beginning of April, and looked up that PCR test, and the whole page had been completely changed. It was completely about COVID. And the whole dialogue, the whole script was completely different. And they took out that it's not to be used for diagnostic testing. And to me, and that was a huge red flag. And then the low incident rate was a huge red flag, and the big overreaction. And, the doctors that were like a deer in the headlights, they didn't know how to treat patients anymore because they're afraid to send them to the hospital. It was scary. It was a really, really, in the
mm,
healthcare, it was a really rough time. And
yeah,
my eyes were open from the beginning.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, initially, like I was compliant because it's a new pandemic, and who
right. You don't
knows
know.
what's going to happen. You don't know how severe this
Mhm.
is. But
Right.
in Melbourne, when we were at a point where it's already like 262 days in forced isolation, and like the cases were low at that point as well. There was just a point where I was just questioning whether, like, and especially the forced jab,
Yeah.
like we didn't have a choice. And I thought I was already convinced at that point that the eczema that I developed was due to the jabs that I've had as a
Right.
child. I
So
thought there's a really strong possibility of that. So
you
yeah,
must
I
have been
didn't really didn't
nervous.
want
Were
it.
you nervous that they were gonna literally force you to take it, and it was gonna flare up
Yeah,
your eczema?
I was nervous. There's actually these videos of in the Australian military, like this whistleblower in the Australian military saying the current exercises we're doing is knocking, like these simulated exercises is we're knocking on people's doors, and then they're running off and we have to chase them and then force inoculate them. And that's exactly what they were doing in China as well. There was videos
Yeah, I saw that.
of them
That's
doing in China, and I
crazy.
was just like, yeah, this is kind of scary.
Yeah.
So I was concerned.
Oh, I bet. Yeah,
And in
absolutely,
fact,
especially.
part of me is still concerned. I mean, for the next, if there is a next pandemic, I mean, if you journey into, I mean, the whole conspiracy side of it, there's Bill Gates had Event 201
Right.
right before the pandemic, where he basically predicted a pandemic. So
Right.
now there's an actual second one which he's released, and he calls it Sears. is the next pandemic, and it's like
Yeah.
estimated to be around 2025.
Yeah. I
And
saw
so
that.
it's freaky. I mean, he has a good success rate at predicting events.
Amazing how that works.
Yeah.
So true. So let's see. Arlene says, I commented on Dr. Mobeen Saeed's channel last year that I was ketovore and had lots of healing, arthritis, and diabetes and lost 70 pounds. Wanted to help those sick from C virus and shots. Yeah, I'm wondering if the carnivore diet can help with people that have been injured by them. Dr. Mobeen started teaching on fasting and healing from fasting around that time. They were interested in keto. Thank you both very much for your good work. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's like I know that this has turned into a little bit of a hot topic, but I don't mind discussing it because I know that I don't I don't mind if people know how I responded as a nurse because there were there were nurses that responded the same as I did, and there were others
Mm,
that didn't. And I think that the point is being able to make the decision for yourself and have information. And I have always felt as a nurse, like I was always one of those nurses that if they gave us like a new protocol or something, and they'd always have like references to resources and stuff to back the protocol up, I would go dig into the resources and make sure that this was actually really evidence based. And there were times where I would challenge the protocols, and I had protocols that were just canceled because it's like they didn't really hold up. They put references under these as for a particular protocol that didn't even support the protocol. And so that was just me. I was a question everything type of nurse.
mm.
And and so
Good on you.
yeah, so I mean it was just kind of natural for me to question this too when it happened. And
Yeah.
to yeah, and not to let myself become afraid and let fear drive my rational thinking.
That's right. And that's the thing. So many people are driven by fear,
Mhm.
even in diet alone. It's like, I'm not going to try a
Mhm.
carnivore diet because I might get cancer and I might get this and I might get that. Even though I did this interview with the UK carnivore, and he said, people are just so amazed that they've been withheld from the truth of curing diabetes by adopting a keto or carnivore diet. And they're
Mhm.
just amazed with the results. And really, what's the limitation that stops you from going there? Well, it's fear
Yeah.
to try that new diet of
Yeah.
going against the World Health Organization's advice to not eat meat.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or following the standard American diet, our food guide
Yeah.
pyramid, which has led to nothing but
Which,
more disease.
yeah. And this is a funny thing because there's so many parallels between COVID and diet. That's
There
why
is.
I've focused on diet, because this debate of COVID is just so emotional and so heated that people don't want to
Yeah.
have it. But the whole meat versus vegan thing, a lot of people are objective and they just find it comedic, even like, oh, vegan versus carnivore. This is something I can just eat popcorn and laugh. Like it's not directly impacting them as deeply as forced inoculations did and the whole COVID thing. That's just so
Well, and
traumatic almost
I
for
think
many
that it's
people.
also it's
So I'm
something
saying I
that
can communicate to people in that
yeah,
way,
it's
but
something we
like,
can control. We can control what we
yeah,
eat. I think people were more afraid because there was this invisible, you know, virus that was out there that might just
yeah,
get you at any time. I think that's why people were more afraid. There was like you don't know, and there's so many unknowns.
yeah.
Let's
Like I'm
see.
saying, the corruption in diet. I mean, Dr. Paul Mason talks about there's these studies done in the 1950s on saturated fat, and they were trying to vilify saturated fat as their goal. But basically, the end result was that they basically proved that seed oils is the one that's awful and dangerous, and saturated fat is okay. So they buried the study, never published it, and it's only been republished now in 2017. Now that all of this new information's coming out, so there is a backlash of hope where
Mhm.
diet is and positive science is actually being disseminated.
Yeah.
But it is the same discussion of corruption in diet, corruption in medicine.
Yes.
So that's why I focus on the carnivore diet, because it's an easier. I'm literally the proof in healing myself, and I can
Right.
show people that diet can heal you. And then as an extension of that, it's the same problem in medicine.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
it really does have its core in healthcare. Both topics have their core in healthcare. Well, and it probably goes into industry. So it's like a combination of healthcare and industry, and the regulatory agencies. They're all coming from a place where they're not really promoting our health.
mm,
I'm not sure about the Australian regulatory agencies, but I don't trust our American regulatory agencies anymore. Especially, I never really trusted them a lot before, but I definitely don't now. Okay, so my Apex Odyssey, I got all the sticks and still have had COVID 5 times. Ours must have been full of water. There's been a study about the batches, that there's batches that have higher incidence of problems. But there was also, I mean, I think early on I was listening to some, was it Italian scientists that had gotten a bunch of samples of the jab, and then they were finding some that were just saline. And then
yeah.
there was problems this is what happens when you rush a product. It doesn't just have to be a scientific, medical product, any product. If you rush it into production, there's going to be problems, because production takes time to tweak and get it right. And I know I was listening to, I forget who, but they were saying that there was a problem because you're talking about lipid, fats in solution. So what happens when you like make Italian dressing and your oil and your vinegar separate, right? So that there was a thought that there was a problem with these batches, that the fats tended to want to float to the top. And so you got this separation, and they didn't really figure out how to keep it well mixed so that you were getting the same dosage each
Mm-hmm.
as it was dispensed into the vials.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there were batches that had really high dosages, and there was other batches that just didn't have anything. And so it was really,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a great point. Yeah.
yeah. So there was, I mean, because I know there's people that are going like, well, yeah, I mean, like she said, she's at them all, and don't get any more. It's like Russian roulette. Eventually, one of them is going to have have a problem.
Yeah.
Um, but it's
It's interesting, the people that say, I've had 5 and I feel fine. So,
Mhm.
it may not affect everyone. Like, I don't know. I'm not
We don't
speaking.
know.
I've got a
Yeah,
Bachelor of Science, but I'm not saying anything is scientifically proven.
right. It's
So,
the fact that we don't know, and they're still being encouraged.
yeah.
That's the thing. It's like we need to make sure that we know before we can assure people that it's safe for them to proceed.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think it would be nice if we could actually talk about this in
Yeah.
society without
Mhm.
fear of censorship. I mean, the fact that we have to encrypt our language just so that it is
Yeah,
seen
it's
is a
ridiculous.
huge red flag in society.
Yes, it is. It is. And it's like I don't I, I'm not telling anybody what to do.
Yeah.
I want people to have a choice to do what they want to do, but I also, as a nurse, I want people to be able to have the information to make an educated decision. That's
Mm.
what I would do regardless. I mean, when I was working in the hospitals, and I mean, yeah, I had patients that I would go from room to room. I worked in a step down from the ICU, so I only had 3 patients a shift, but every time I'd give them their medications, and whether it was a pill or something to inject or whatever, every med, I would go over them. This is what I'm giving you. This is what it's for. These are potential side effects. And I was educating them on their medications, and everything that I did with them. I was telling them, this is what I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing it. And this is why the doctor thinks this would be good. That's just part of being a nurse. And so to not have anything to tell people about a product that we're telling them to take is just completely against everything, all of my training and everything that I ever learned.
Mm.
So let's see. So Arlene says, I had brain fog and more depression after the virus in January, and that's why I began this carnivore. Oh, interesting. 10 weeks ago, and felt better in 2 weeks. Oh, wow.
Wow,
Almost
congrats.
started antidepressants and leg pain left. So, yeah, so that's interesting, because we were just talking about wondering whether the carnivore diet could help.
Yeah,
Interesting.
well, I think the ancestral way of eating definitely. I mean, your body is just dealing with all this toxins may not be the right word, but just toxins in the environment, whether that is, as I said before, EMF, whether that's from food. And just by reducing the work, like you were talking about with the constant cutting of yourself and the abrasions, if we just stop cutting ourselves
Mhm.
metaphorically, we give time to our body to heal. And
Mhm.
Dr. Paul Saladino talks about this. What was the original way of eating for 2 million years that we've kind of lost? And as people are getting more sick, and we only have this new diet of seed oils and processed sugars and canned food that lasts a long time on the shelf, really only in the last 100 years. So what's the best way we can return to our history of 2 million years of evolution and stop the metaphorical cutting, give our body time to recover? Well, that is the carnivore diet. That's the carnivore
Yeah.
way of eating. And you
Yeah.
can look at Inuit tribes who today, Inuit tribes tend to eat more of the processed foods because it's just disseminated into their culture. But in the 1950s, they did studies on America versus Inuit, and it actually turned out that like cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, like all that was highly prevalent in America, like 30% of the population, whereas in the Inuit tribes, it was only 1%, and they were adopting a full carnivore diet.
You would think that that study would be broadcast over all of the news media,
Well, that's the
but you
thing.
never hear it.
If you go down the rabbit hole and you think that there's money to be made from medicine, like from continuous dependency to pills and the billions of dollars of industry in pharmaceuticals,
Right.
then it starts to really make sense why it's not broadcasted
Yeah, it does. It makes complete sense. And
and why everything's censored when you uh like go
when you
against it.
yeah, when you try to have a different narrative than
That's
that.
right.
Yeah, absolutely. But I strongly believe in the power of people,
Mm,
and that if the masses decide they want something, industry will follow.
mhm.
Because, people, it's where do you put your money?
That's right.
And since they're money driven,
Mm,
if you stop giving them your money, then they're going to have to change because they're going to go out of business otherwise.
mhm.
But it's just a matter of enough people. And so, no, so now, do you follow Carrie from Homestead How?
No, I haven't heard
Oh,
of her.
it's a he, actually.
Oh, sorry, I
Carrie.
haven't heard of him. I just thought of Stephen King's Carrie and just assumed it was a girl.
Yeah, wrong Carrie. Uh, so you need to check him out. So he is making a carnivore diet documentary.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. I'm on the research committee for the
You are? That's
yes,
amazing.
yeah, for the
Yeah.
documentary. So, yeah. So in fact, I'm going to share your this chat with him. And
Amazing.
yeah, I don't know if he knows you or not, but you need to look him up because he's
Okay.
doing incredible things.
Yeah.
And he is all the all these doctors that are in the carnivore community are on board with um with this documentary.
Yeah. It's
And
so amazing. Like this whole journey has just changed the projection of my life. Like there was a time
mhm,
where I did a 6-month degree in computer programming because I didn't want to see anyone. And I just wanted to work from home because I was ornamented in just disease and disfigured. And I wanted to stay out of the light. But now I've re-enrolled into a postgraduate degree in biochemistry because I just want to be at the forefront of
wow.
modern science and just change the narrative and actually prove to everyone with legitimate science and actually know what I'm talking about as well so that I can gain more
Mhm.
credibility too.
Well, you have a really sharp mind and you're obviously
Oh,
very well
thanks.
read. So, we need to have people whose eyes are open going into those fields
Mm,
and shaking things up.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
it
are
is a
we
bit
good?
scary. Like, at the
Yeah.
back of your mind, you're wondering like I don't know, you see like again, it's conspiracy, but like those who fight the system can potentially be in danger.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
lose their business, lose their money,
Right.
they're not be able to hire it. And worst case scenario, I don't
Right.
know, get hit by a car accidentally.
Well, check out the Highwire. Go on to Rumble. Check out the Highwire. They have a legal team that has fought and won against the FDA, the CDC, all these government agencies. They're right now fighting and challenging. They have a brilliant legal team, and that's
Yeah.
actually their weekly broadcast is just a component of what they do. It's but they are donation driven, and they support all
Amazing.
their legal team, and they sue the heck out of all these government agencies, and they're winning.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, yeah,
It
and they're
just gives you
winning.
such hope.
And they're
Like,
actually they're making headway in turning over the PrEP Act in the US, which is the act that lifted liability from these manufacturers
yeah,
of like Pfizer and all the vaccine manufacturers. They have no liability,
amazing.
and because of the PrEP Act, and
Yeah, yeah,
his attorney is on the road to getting that overturned, and he's starting to make some progress.
yeah,
So that would be huge. Just like if a company cannot stand by their product and ensure that their product is safe, and they actually know that they're liable if their product does harm, then it's a problem, because if there's no liability for if your product does harm, there's what's the incentive to make sure that it's safe, you
yeah.
know? So Arlene says, watched a video last night from Carbadic Gone Carnivore and Dr. Joan Iflin. I've never heard of her. Told how we got to where we are. The way to keep weight loss and health is community. Us together are strong, mirroring each other. Yes, I agree. Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying about I have a lot of faith in people. And the more we are able to share that this is a viable diet, a viable therapeutic diet. And I like what you say, and that is, and I've listened to quite a few of your videos, is you're not shoving this down people's throats.
No.
And I don't think that it needs to be an ideology. It needs to be a viable option as a therapeutic diet for people.
Mm, mm. Well,
And
just to be aware that it exists. And I
exactly.
think
And
I
then
think that's why as my stories resonated with so many people. It's because you can literally see black and white
right,
that it's working. And now there's proof, like it's not proof, but it's because people say n equals one. It's like it's one person. It's anecdotal, if you will. But at least people can see it before and
yes,
after that it is working, at least
right,
with one person.
right, right.
And it's not just
And
one
you're
person, it's thousands of people around the
It's
world.
yes, exactly, and when it comes to the whole thing about, "Oh, well, it's anecdotal." Okay, yes, but when like you said, when it's thousands of people and that are experiencing the same thing, it's still anecdotal, but you should be paying attention.
Mm.
It's something, but they're not gonna do any scientific research behind it. There's no money in
Yeah,
it,
that's
you
right.
know?
I was talking to my friend last night, and he was talking about like, doesn't it depress you when you do all this research and you like uncover the truths of how they're suppressing this and the medical system's so corrupt, and like when you open your eyes, it's just depressing. And we're talking about a brave new world. Like, I'm not sure if you,
Mhm.
if yeah, and like he says, there's a drug in that book called Soma, which you take just to like escape and take your mind away from everything. And he's like, you know what? If the more he says, the more I do research on this corrupt medical system and everything, the more I just want to take Soma. Ignorance is bliss. And he's like, how do you survive like knowing everything that you do and not feeling so depressed? I'm like, well, it's exactly what you said before, Lynn, on that legal team existing and that they're surviving and they're strong and then they're winning. Like, how could you be depressed knowing that there's good people out there in the world,
Well,
a force for
exactly.
good, and we're like changing the narrative and we're offering people their health back? Like, it's so
Exactly.
inspiring.
Oh, yeah, no, and we donate to them.
Yeah,
Every month. And so it's really, really great when I get the reports on what they're doing and the victories they're having. I feel like I contributed to that.
yeah,
And it's really great to see. And since I started watching them in 2020, it's been really cool to see the progress that's been made, and how now they have actual politicians that were not open to talking about safety with this product that are now open to talking about it. And their attorney was just called before to set it as a Senate hearing in the state of Arizona where it was all about safety of this product. So it's like, I'd love to be able to talk without having to, when YouTube lets us say words without
Without
flagging,
censorship.
I'll
Yeah.
feel like that we've really come a long ways. But
Yeah.
in the meantime, yeah, we talk cryptically. But the point is that they are making progress,
Yeah.
and it's
And
all
it's so
about,
inspiring,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
and they're all about safety. I mean, just and RFK has been on their show a lot. He's a massive, massive fan of the show, and they have all these people in their show that you probably know about, and
Yeah.
so
So good.
it's like my one resource for if you want to get all the good information. It's my one resource that is always been reliable.
You have to link it in this, and I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I'll go ahead and put a link in the well, it's a Rumble. It's in Rumble.
Okay.
But I'll put a note at least. I'll see if I can link it, but if not, I'll put a note in it, and yeah, start watching it. It's on Thursday evenings. I don't know when it shows up in Australia. Thursday evenings. I think they're in Texas, so that would be like Central Standard Time. So
Yeah, I'll have to do the conversion.
yeah, yeah. But anyways, we never usually catch it on Thursdays anyway, so we usually watch it on the weekend. But yeah, very informative. All right, good. Well, we have gone over 2 hours.
Yeah.
It has been so fun talking to you.
Yeah, it's great
Yeah,
to get to know you and have this conversation, and I'm so
yeah,
inspired with
absolutely.
some of the things you've said. Like, I had no idea that those legal teams existed, and it just inspires me. I just,
Yeah,
it confirms my decision that yes, I want to go into biochemistry. Yes, I want to like counter this narrative as much as I can, even though there's
mhm,
danger is the wrong word, but there's fear in opposing the powerful systems that want to
yeah.
suppress, but like there's such inspiration there that I haven't heard before. So yeah, I've
Yeah,
learned so
yeah, if
much
you
just
wanna
from
be
this.
inspired, watch it, and there's a lot of people who are silent but agree, and
Yeah.
so yeah. So Errol says, "I've journaled my carnivore journey to show people that they have an option. Before and after pics are very powerful. It's also filled with research, so I can give a good explanation of what exactly I did." Errol,
Woo.
anytime you wanna come on and join me for a chat, just shoot me an email. I love chatting with people. It's just midlifecarnivore@gmail.com. So if you want to come in on and chat with me, I'd love to chat with you too. So I don't have
Yeah.
any more live streams, any more people, I just started doing live streams fairly recently. And so I'm, uh, putting my feelers out for having somebody else come on and join me. But I'm so excited that, you were willing to come join me and very grateful.
Yeah, I'm
And
so grateful too. Thank you for having me on.
yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna go ahead and say good night, and I
Yeah.
hope thank you for everybody who stuck around and was sharing and watching. And thank you so much, Bradley, and have a
Thank you.
wonderful evening, everybody.
You too. See ya.